So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. Thank you so much for making time to join us in these important discussions that we want to have. And as we all know that HLPF events will be coming up in July. And as a movement, we thought it is very important for all of us to be together so that we can plan and discuss what is it that we want to do. As we all know that one of the areas that will be reviewed this year is SDG 4, and we work in education. So it is actually right for us to have a great showing there, to have meaningful contribution within all the processes of HLPF. We all know that this starts at the national, there is also a regional process, as well as a global process. So we really want to engage with you today so that we can discuss areas where we can engage, where we can really be there to check what is it that governments are saying. Always it is a tendency of governments to only paint the rosy picture, but we know that that's not necessarily the truth. So we will be discussing areas of spotlight reports, alternative reports, where you as national coalitions would actually be able to work on that so that together we can really present a good one position from one movement. So I welcome you again to the event, and now I'll hand over to Vena to take us through the HLPF process itself. Over to you, Vena.
Thank you very much, Grant, and greetings, colleagues, and thank you very much for joining this very preliminary, very introductory call to HLPF. This will be just the beginning of a process that will culminate with the high-level political forum in New York in July this year. So for this agenda, we are aiming to provide some basic information on the high-level political forum. Then our dear colleague Katarina Popovic will explain the functioning of the major groups and other stakeholders, which gathers the civil society organizations and more concretely the education and academic representations working in the field of education. So Katarina will explain also the organization of the education and the academia stakeholder group. Then we will give the chance to our dear colleagues, Lai Santiago and Rene Raya from ASBAE to walk us through the preparation of a spotlight reports. As you may know, ASBAE has a fantastic experience on producing spotlights reports, so they are our champions on this, and we will have the pleasure to hear from them some tips for the preparation of spotlights reports. This is quite important this year, and I will tell you why later. And then we will finish this call with some proposal for next steps on how to move forward to the high-level political forum. So this is our agenda for today. So we want to inform all of you about the organization of this very important advocacy space. So let me just quickly provide some information about the forum for those who are not familiarized with this important space. The forum was established back in 2012 by the United Nations, by the General Assembly, as a way to follow up the realization of the Sustainable Development Agenda. So the forum meets annually under the auspices of the UN, and more concretely under the auspices of the Economic, Social, and Council. So they meet every year for 8 days, and this meeting includes a kind of official session they call the ministerial segment, and every 4 years the forum gathers the head of state and the government officials also under the auspices of the General Assembly. So the HLPF, the High Level Political Forum, is obviously a political space. And therefore, the vision of human rights is not always evident, as you can imagine. Despite this, it is always possible to find in the activities of the forum a lot of information and technical analysis that come from different actors, such as government officials, certainly, but also experts from specialized agencies, scholars, and activists. So this technical analysis is not always usual among politicians. In fact, we have seen in some of the sessions, for example, how in some cases government representatives take advantage of their interventions to promote touristic activities in their countries, which is ridiculous, but well, that also can happen. In any case, being a political forum, there is always room to criticize and to propose measures to advance the sustainable development agenda. And for GCE is without any doubt a space for international political advocacy. So the HLPF is the main United Nations platform on sustainable development, and it has a central role in the follow-up and in the review of the 2030 agenda for sustainable development, and more concretely for SDG 4, which is of our interest. So as part of its follow-up and review mechanisms, as we all know, the 2030 agenda encourages all member states to regularly review the progress at national and subnational levels of the realization of the agenda. So these national reviews are expected to serve as a basis for the regular reviews by the HLPF. What else? Well, member states have stressed the need for the HLPF to promote transparency and implementation by further enhancing the consultative role and participation of the civil society organized in these major groups and other stakeholders, and Katarina will have the chance to explain more with more detail. So major groups and other stakeholders are absolutely key partners for the development of all this process. Well, just let me tell you that since the adoption of the high-level political forum, the major groups have been very actively working towards the implementation of the SDG agenda. And the education academia stakeholder group, and again, Katarina will explain more in detail, have been very active, also participating in all spaces regarding civil society participation in the HLPF. Okay, just let me also add that the high-level political forum every year adopts a political declaration. So this is something that is being agreed by governments throughout a very interesting negotiation, a political negotiation. So this political declaration that is adopted every year is important insofar as it allows us to observe the points of agreement between governments, between states. And although the document is usually quite lax, and it is not always useful for accountability purposes, civil society organizations always take the opportunity to provide inputs, and sometimes we also use this statement, this declaration, as an input for our own work. And I would say that the preparation process of the political declaration is perhaps more important than the result itself, because the preparation forces us to interact with states and among ourselves. So it's a very interesting process as well. So the high-level political forum has official sessions, as I mentioned. It contains 3 days of ministerial segments, and in these official sessions, the representatives of the states take the stage to refer to the different views on the issues in focus, which this year are referred to objectives 4, 5, 14, and 15. And during the official sessions, there is the possibility that the GCE can address the states together with other participants participating in different thematic panels. And of course, government representatives have the opportunity to discuss different topics. So the discussions usually open to the possibility of launching political accusations. And in this year, the context of war will possibly give way to very heavy discussions. Then the high-level political forum also requests states, governments to produce voluntary national reviews, and this is absolutely critical. So governments are encouraged to conduct regular and inclusive reviews of the progress, as I mentioned. So based on accumulated experience, some of these voluntary reports are seriously produced by states, and in other cases are simple, situation reports, sometimes devoid of critical meaning. So these reports are presented during sessions, and civil society groups and other participants are given the opportunity to ask questions during the presentations. So these questions or interventions in the case of the civil society are super short, maybe sometimes it's 2 minutes, 2 minutes right reaction. So we cannot have great expectations to have real discussions with the states. So it's important that GC members can produce alternative reports, spotlight reports that can be released as counterpoints to the official versions. So we will have 8 first-time presenters this year: Djibouti, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Gabon, Guinea-Bissau, Sao Tome and Principe, Suriname and Tuvalu. Then we have 26 countries reporting for the second time this year, which are Andorra, Belarus, Botswana, Cameroon, Comoros, Cote d'Ivoire, Eswatini, Ethiopia, Gambia, Ghana, Greece, Italy, Jamaica, Jordan, Kazakhstan, Latvia, Liberia, Luxembourg, Mali, Montenegro, the Netherlands, Pakistan, Senegal, Sri Lanka, Sudan, and the United Arab Emirates. Then we have 3 third-time presenters, 3 countries this year: Argentina, Philippines, and Switzerland, and 4th-time presenters, 2 countries, in this case, Togo and Uruguay. Don't worry, we will provide the list of countries afterwards. I just wanted to mention. Then, as you can see, the participation of the civil society organization is crucial, not only because we have the possibility to influence at the international policy space, but also because we can present and disseminate our visions and political positions on the right to education in general, including lifelong learning, of course, and on the Sustainable Development Agenda, concretely in the goal 4, and interlinkages with other goals. So regarding the spotlights reports, the preparation of alternative reports, shadow reports, or whatever you can name it, is a unique opportunity to critically report on the state of realization of SDGs in the countries where GC members work. So these reports can play an important role during the forum, but they can also be relevant inputs to be used in many other forums and processes, such as the UN treaty bodies processes, for instance, and many other cases. So for this reason, we want to encourage the GCE members whose countries report this year to prepare spotlight reports. And our dear ASBAE colleagues, Rene and Lei, will offer some recommendations related to the preparation of these reports. And later, we will also inform you about some plans to support the preparation of spotlight reports. And finally, just let me tell you that we are also preparing side events during the HLPF. And this is absolutely crucial because this offers us the possibility to disseminate our views and our positions on the different topics under discussion during the HLPF. For this year, we are considering organizing 3 side events. One is the one organized by the Education Academia Stakeholder Group. The other one is a side event aimed at presenting the spotlights reports from different countries reporting this year. And a third one will be focused on GCE crucial political issues. This is not yet organized, but this is our proposal. No? So we want to hear your recommendations on what kind of approaches GCE should have within these 3 proposals. And finally, we are organizing an exhibition related to our education and emergencies campaign during the forum. I know there are a lot of questions. We will have time for responding the questions, but let me now continue with the explanation of the functioning of the major groups. So Katarina cannot join us in person, but she produced a video and we want to run this video. So I will ask our colleagues to run this video now, please.
Hello, dear colleagues. First of all, let me say that I'm very sorry that I cannot join you in a more interactive way today because I'm traveling. I'm in Tunis right now when you're listening to this video, not in this lovely beach that you see in my virtual background, but for the work. But at least I'm glad that I have the opportunity to share with you some of the experiences we have working as Education Academia Stakeholder Group in the system of major groups and other stakeholders in the UN. I prepared a presentation that will help me to go through these most important aspects of our work. And here it is. So I will take you through the work of major groups and other stakeholders, and then also the work of Education Academia Stakeholder Group, where GCE, ICA, and Global Students Forum are active and engaged, representing education and academic communities. So let me first start with introducing a little bit major groups and other stakeholders coordination mechanism. It was a short historical overview. It was introduced on the so-called Earth Summit that you probably know, so just a short reminder. And that was the moment when it was recognized that non-governmental stakeholders are important for the implementation of the global agendas. And there were even some formal paragraphs that you can see here at 42 until 55 that explicitly allowed major groups and other stakeholders to be involved in all the matters related to the UN and to the sustainable development. So usually we take this Earth Summit as the beginning of our engagement. When I say our, I mean non-governmental actors, the whole range of them. It was further confirmed with the famous resolution of the United Nations General Assembly, and that's what we keep also repeating, but because, as you can imagine, there are still many governments that are not really happy with the fact that civil society and other non-governmental actors are taking part in the high-level political forum and in the creation and monitoring of the global agendas. So here is the sentence that we use. This is from this resolution, and help us to remind the governments and to remind UN of the mandate we have and on the role that we play. By this resolution, major groups and other stakeholders are allowed, and you can see here the list of the things that are allowed. For example, basic one, to attend all official meetings. Well, it might look like not something special, be allowed to attend, but even that is an achievement. We know how UN context looks like, and the government is dominating this context. And of course, many of them are really not happy with the fact that we are there. So even this simple sentence, to attend to all official meetings, is something. Pay attention, only the official meetings, but not the non-formal and not official ones. And of course, we know in UN many things are happening in unofficial way and behind the closed doors. But still, this is an achievement. So further on, we have access to official documents, information at the preparatory stage, even, for example, ministerial declaration of the HLPF and so on. We have the right to intervene, although it's sometimes only a few minutes, and these few minutes are sometimes even shortened, but still, to submit our own documents, to submit and present them, to make recommendations, and also to organize various events, side events, roundtables, exhibitions, and so on. So this is the basis, the formal basis, or the formal framework for our work. You have noticed that I'm mentioning major groups and other stakeholders. This differentiation is, well, not so important today anymore, but still it refers to the previous times when, in this Rio summit that I have mentioned, 5 of the major groups were identified at the beginning, and I have listed them here, and they call themselves major groups. They were at the very beginning there. And as you can see, some of them are really close to us, like NGO major groups or REMIS major groups and so on. But later on, further groups were added, and we call them stakeholder groups. And of course, you see red highlighted is education academia, or as they sometimes call us, educational and academic entities. We are a relatively new one, but not the newest or the youngest one. So the few that you see at the end, 11, 12, and 13, they are added later. They joined us later. All in all, it's like currently, I think 22 or 23, but they are not all engaged at the same level. So I would say no more than 16 or 17 are actively engaged. This is a simplified chart of UN structure. I say simplified because it's a very complex mechanism, but I just wanted to show you where do we fit in and what is the framework for our work. So here is the HLPF, which is the high-level political forum of sustainable development, the platform that reviews sustainable development goals every year, meeting every year in July. But of course, there is an ongoing work also throughout the year. And this is done under the auspice of Economic and Social Council. And you can see here what is the position of this council in the UN structure. But we also can participate, and that's what we also do, in the HLPF when it's held under the auspice of General Assembly. Of course, it's not so active, interactive, dynamic as HLPF. It's more formal. But still, we have a right also to be there and to intervene and to interact in the processes. And here, more concrete, high-level political development. So you see what are the elements where we can take part. I will not go through the details, like, just to mention voluntary national reports that are submitted every year by several countries. They volunteer, of course, for that. So we do play a role there in regional mechanism, in thematic reviews, and so on. So high-level political forum is quite complex. It's not just one event. It's not just conference where people meet, but there is a range of processes leading to HLPF and also a range of processes that are happening in July. So we are trying to take part in all of them. This is a relatively simple way for me to show you how the major groups and other stakeholder groups work. So this is the chart done by me. So as you can see, there are national, regional organizations, networks, civil society organizations, and the others. So an example, of course, ICEA and GCE. So they form major groups, stakeholder groups, being it women or farmers, local administration, indigenous people, people with disabilities, some of those that you have seen. I put here 22, all of them might be 23 formally. So those national and regional networks, they form major groups or stakeholder groups. So this is one of them, education, academia. They have so-called organizing partners, and you probably know, so it's just a reminder, that GCE, ICEA, and currently Global Students Forum are the organizing partners, and they delegate each one person into this coordination mechanism. This is a kind of a steering group. We don't really like to call it steering, because we are not steering, we are really coordinating more the work of our constituencies and try to be their link to the UN system around sustainable development goals. I said here, you see 2 co-chairs free, because currently formally it's GCE and ICEA, and we are in a process of changes that I will explain a little bit later. So we will probably have free co-chairs and free people to delegate into this group that we call coordination mechanism. So quite a complex system, each of them consisting of several levels, each of them having their own constituencies. So you can see already that that's an issue of how to coordinate all of them, how to be the good link, how to make it in a participatory way, having in mind especially very tight deadlines that we face almost all the time. Working with UN, it's really not easy, and it's a continuous challenge, not only for us, but for all the other groups. We know because we exchange with them and we try to learn from them, especially for those who are older, who work for a longer time. So this coordination mechanism is trying, as you can see, to ensure broad, open, transparent, inclusive participation in HLPF. And of course, there are a few elements of this right and of this mission. Again, here the formal framework is mentioned. So we are really trying to be the voice of the whole non-governmental sector, including variety of partners. That includes also business and industry. It sounds a bit funny even that business and industry is one of the groups, but well, that's the fact, although our interests are not always the same, but still we do communicate and exchange and cooperate. So we try to be their voice, and we try to include as many organization partners, constituencies as we can. So this is a very nice visual description of the work we do. This is throughout the year. This is before the HLPF happens. A lot of desk work, a lot of papers, exchanges, meetings, and sometimes I think really that I do look like a diskette. Before the pandemic, we also had face-to-face meetings, not many of them, of course, because we have to meet somewhere and we are all over the world. So every meeting costs a fortune, but still we did manage to have a few meetings, and they were really good for coordination of our common work. We are very different. You saw the target groups that we are and constituencies that we are representing are very different. So it's not easy to coordinate, to find the common ground, but those meetings did help us to do so. So currently I can say that we really have a very good cooperation in this system, recognizing also the specificity of the certain groups and of our own constituencies. And we are really glad that there is a mutual support. So this is what we do throughout the year. And then there are, of course, especially after the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, plenty of the meetings, well, online, remote, using different kind of the tools. What kind of meeting? There are many of them. So we meet regularly with the DESA. This is the department, you saw it on this chart of UN that I showed. DESA is the department in UN that is in charge for us, in charge of communicating with us, in charge of being the link and making sure that our participation is smooth and is guaranteed. Of course, it doesn't work always as it should, but still meetings with DESA are regularly. Then we meet the president of ECOSOC, we meet president of General Assembly, we meet co-facilitators for different stages of the HLPF, for example, co-facilitators that work on preparation of ministerial declaration, preparation of expert group meetings. So in this huge system, complex system, there are many different kinds of outcomes of documents. There are many different kinds of exchanges. So we try really to be there wherever there is something going on, wherever we want to have a word on the topic. Of course, we take part in the meetings that are related to education and academia, but we also take part in the others because as a coordination mechanism, we have a lot in common with other groups. For example, when it comes to participation of non-governmental actors, no matter if it's educational organizations, or if it's indigenous people. We believe they have the right to participate, and we work together on making this participation possible and as active as it could be. Then, of course, very critical attitude towards the government, then having different voices, diversity of voices. So there are many common things. There's the reason why we, together with other colleagues from other groups, we try to be there. We are very present in all different types of meetings. So what you see here, the guy with the phones and this crazy cat that I've just showed, sometimes in the reality, it really does look like this. In this coordination mechanism with around 20 active groups, more or less, we have subgroups. And these subgroups are, of course, arranged around the various tasks. There is subgroup on advocacy and communication in the context of advocacy. The group that coordinates civil society input to voluntary national reports. Governments are submitting, and we are asking questions, critical questions. Well, it maybe does sound like really an achievement. You have the opportunity to ask a question. Your government or any government is reporting and you ask a question. But I can assure you, even this simple question is sometimes very troubling for some governments. So they don't want to hear any critical word or to hear any mentioning any of the groups of topics that they don't like. So we use this opportunity that we are in UN and we do ask the critical question. But of course, UN is a very formalized space. So we have to go through the whole procedures in order to get the opportunity to ask the question. Who is asking and how is it arranged and how do we formally apply and so on. Sometimes we always also fight about the topic, the question, if we should submit our questions earlier, because that's what they tried also to impose in order to be able to prepare. Sounds good, but we feel that it's kind of a control. So that's why we have a group that is dealing with voluntary national reports and our civil society input to that. Of course, communication is very important for this whole group because we have a huge mailing list, not only our constituencies, but also many other partners, and it needs also to be coordinated and arranged. There is an ongoing HLPF reform, but there are also different groups that we take part in. There is every year in HLPF, there is so-called collective event. We organize side events. Other groups are organizing also some meetings. There are formal meetings that we are allowed and invited to send participants. And of course, the number is huge. The number of potential candidates is huge, having in mind all our constituencies. So we go through the selection process, and it's very time consuming and very difficult, respecting different type of criteria. So there is a group also working on that. So we try to have members in all these groups, but we are not very, we are not so massive as some other groups. For example, women's major group, they have in each of the groups minimum one person. We are so small, so at least we are taking part in advocacy, voluntary national report, communication, HLPF reform. But of course, our constituencies are invited to support us. So even if you are not continuously engaged in all the work that I have presented, you can take part in some of those groups, especially if you're interested in contributing to some of them. Any contribution, any support is more than welcome. So, and when HLPF happens in July, then we strategize. Well, I really don't like the uniforms. It has a military touch. But, you know, the position of the body positions and the way they work, you know, we have the scheme of what's going in the UN on a certain day. What are the formal events, the side events, additional meetings, meetings with the delegations. And then every morning we meet early in the morning before the formal representatives and UN employees come. And then we strategize who will go there, what are the issues that we will raise, how will our colleagues and participants come, how can we help them and support them, and so on. Cooperation is crucial. Alone, none of us could do anything because it's global. It means we are covering the world and we are covering as coordination mechanism all the topics. So without coordination and cooperation, none of us would be able to raise any single issue in the UN. That's the reason why this close cooperation and coordination within the coordination mechanism is so important. So as education academia stakeholder groups, so just a few information here, some data here. We established 2016 immediately after the adoption of, a year after the adoption of Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030. And as you can see here, the usual, we bring human rights-based education civil society. So not anyone, this is one of the preconditions. And of course, academia, not any academia, not whole university sector, but those who work in education, who work and research in education. You see that at the beginning, as the founders, we had Education International, and then recently they shared with us that they cannot be an organizing partner anymore because they are organizing partner in another group, but they remain a member, an important member. Everything it has to do with the teachers and the staff education, they are our partners in that. We had European Students Forum, which is now changed. And in the future, instead of a European Students Forum, we will have a Global Students Forum as an organizing partner and, of course, taking part in other activities. So, as I said, in a way of summarizing, we participate in this coordination mechanism in the single task groups of coordination mechanism and in almost all relevant events that are going on in UN in the context of Sustainable Development Goals. So we keep reminding ourselves there are related events and related streams of activities and actions, but we have to stick to those that are directly related to the Agenda 2030. So there are a few single activities that I would like to present briefly. We have the web page. One of the challenges right now, we are about to renew it, and our new organizing partner, Global Students Forum, they will help us with that. Well, young people very good in IT, digital skills, and so on. So we do have it, but it requires some refreshment and some updates. That's going on right now. Next one is preparation of the papers. First and most important is so-called sectoral paper or position paper. Every year, every group has the obligation to submit a paper, a position paper, reviewing the most important issues, development, challenges, and recommendation for that year. Just yesterday, it was the deadline to submit the executive summary. This is an older one. I didn't have time to upload the new one, but it's just executive summary. We now have to develop the whole paper. And of course, the support and the contribution are more than welcome because we try to put all the important issues important for us from our perspective into one paper, having in mind different character and different priorities of our different constituencies. It's not easy, but until now we did produce, I would dare to say, really some very good sectoral papers. So pending task is to develop one for the 2022. But we also developed the other kind of papers. There are continuously some position papers, or at least, you know, invitation to add some small paragraphs to some common papers, common of those that include all the groups. And of course, we try to be there and to take the opportunity. If there is a common paper of coordination mechanism, we don't want to miss the opportunity to have a paragraph on education. Even it's a quite general one, to raise any issue in education in UN is a big thing. Because as you know, UN is the global space where they decide about, well, war and peace and the trade and weapon and this kind of things. So like crucial issues. And of course, we need still to fight for the understanding that education does belong to the crucial issues. So we never miss opportunity to add a paragraph or a page to some other papers that are prepared commonly by the whole coordination mechanism. Here you see the input that we just prepared. It was less than a month ago. There are so-called expert group meetings, and we are invited to prepare the input for the colleagues that will talk in other sessions where we cannot be there. We cannot cover all of them, but so they can have in mind educational issues that are important. You see here different type of meetings. This is the usual meeting that happens regularly every second week, the meeting of coordination mechanism of MGOS, and that's where we regularly take part. We also take part here, for example, this is the part of the presentation that I gave. It was consultations for the ministerial declaration last year. The next one is just coming in a week. So sometimes we speak on behalf of coordination mechanism, on behalf of the whole group, and then we talk about some common issues, some values that are relevant for all of us. And sometimes, of course, we do mention also the education. But as I said at the beginning, this cooperation is very important. So even if we don't have the opportunity to talk about education, because it's a very general meeting, we do take part because we want to keep our role in the system, to keep our space and time and possibility to speak and to represent our constituencies. What we also do is to help our constituencies, our members, our partners also to participate in the HLPF. You see here a small part of the program for the HLPF. I think it was, yes, last year. Of course, because of the pandemic, last 2 years were virtual, but most probably now it will go with the face-to-face meeting starting this year, maybe with some kind of transition stage with the hybrid format, but it will go on. And then it's a mess. It's a labyrinth of not only physical spaces in the UN, but also ways to enter, to have the ticket not only for the whole building, but also for the single sessions, because there are a limited number of the seats. So when our colleagues come, and that has to be prepared earlier. You cannot just come and participate. It has to be announced. There are the procedures. So we help with that. And when our colleagues, partners, members come, we help them also physically, you know, to orient themselves through in the UN, but also through the program. There are hundreds of events going on parallel. So how do we decide what is the priority and where we should be there, and where our members and partners who came for the HLPF, where they could be or where they could contribute. So we are trying to be a helping hand during the HLPF in July. So what you can see here are other types of the meetings. For example, every year when we took part in the HLPF, we used the opportunity also to meet in New York all our members that were there. I suppose we will have to go with the virtual meeting still for some time, but this is an an illustration of the meeting that we had in one of the years. Of course, now we go on with the virtual meetings, and we are very present there. So we take part in different types of the meetings. And also we support not only us, but we support our members in participate. Wherever and whenever there is opportunity to have people who belong to our constituencies, we try to include them as much as possible. Of course, more than 20 major groups and other stakeholders, and then limited possibility. It's not possible very often, but still whenever it is, we try to make sure that someone from the education and academia world is there. We also organize side events regularly. Every year, we never missed an opportunity to have side event. And of course, to have a side event in UN, that's a big deal. And thanks to the fact that we belong to this MGOS, major groups and other stakeholder groups, and to their coordination mechanism, we have a guaranteed minimum one side event. And we are really trying to make the best use of this fact and organize the side event. Usually they are very well visited. It was the case with the physical HLPF, but it's also the case with our virtual side events that we had to organize because of the COVID-19 pandemic. They are very, very much visited and very popular, and we hope it will be the case in the future. We also organize exhibitions, well, real ones or the virtual ones, and try also to be part of the formal program. So whenever it's possible, we use the opportunity. And what we are currently doing is we are trying to improve the work of Education Academia Stakeholder Group. You see here the terms of references that we have just revised. I believe last time we did it, well, both Werner and I, well, at least 2 or 3 times, each of us. And now the colleague from Global Students Forum did join us also. So we have been tidying up and polishing the text several times. And it will be offered for the adoption at the next meeting of the members, the so-called Members Assembly of Education Academia Stakeholder Group. There are some changes where we have improved the text and way of working and so on, but the biggest change is probably the one that I have mentioned at the beginning, that European Students Forum will be formally replaced by Global Students Forum, and Education and International will withdraw from the position of the organizing partner, but of course not as the member. They will remain the member. So it's, and as I mentioned, we will improve our webpage. What we hope is also to mobilize new members and also to improve our communication. It has to be faster. It has to be more efficient. We have very tight deadlines from DESA and from the UN. So it's really not easy to have a participatory decision-making with such a tight deadlines. So we hoping that we will improve the communication. I also believe that we will be able to do it in a more participatory way, interactive way, and inclusive way. This is the ongoing task, but this is also the task that we are currently dealing with now. So you see here also social networks. That's what also has to be improved. And as I said, I hope that the colleagues from the Global Students Forum will help us. So improving membership, you see here, and that's what you can see on our webpage, some of our members. We are currently reviewing the list, and thanks to Werner that he's doing this, reviewing the list of the members and updating the information, updating the data and the contacts and so on. So this is the ongoing task, and this is something that we will complete, I hope, soon, and we will call for the members' assembly, and I hope many of you will be there for the members' assembly. So this is the short overview. I will try to connect, to log in during my stay in Tunis in order to maybe give additional information or maybe to answer some of your questions. If I don't make, I'm really sorry for that, but I'm sure that Werner will do this role fully. And I certainly hope that we will have more of this kind of opportunity to inform each other or also to exchange in the future. Thank you very much. I wish you a successful remaining meeting. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Katarina, for this great video. I think that it was very informative and very useful for us to understand the role of the education academia stakeholder group and the civil society participation in general. I know that there might be a lot of questions, so we will have the chance to comment after the presentations. Let me now go to the next segment of this call, which is how to produce a spotlight report. So I would like to invite Lai Santiago and Rene Raya from ASBAE to introduce this topic and to show us a bit of their experience on producing spotlight reports, and they will also give us some tips very useful for the preparation of spotlights report. So it's over to you, dear Lai and Rene. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Werner, and thank you, colleagues, for organizing this meeting and for having us here. Hello and greetings from Manila. I am Lai Santiago of the Asia South Pacific Association for Basic and Adult Education, or ASBAE. And I have the privilege of sharing with you the ASBAE experience in producing spotlight reports, including the lessons learned and relevance to advocacy. Now, before we start, I would like to know how many of colleagues have had experience in developing spotlight reports. If you can raise your virtual hand or your actual hand, that would be great. And if, okay, so we've got a few here. So Zara and Nasimakon, okay, thank you so much. Now, if you could type in the chat box and let us know what the spotlight report was about and where you've used it, and if you have any lessons that you can share with us as well, that would be appreciated. So what is a spotlight report? It is a civil society analytical paper on the SDG implementation status. So it provides the civil society perspective and analysis to the official government report or the Voluntary National Review, or VNR, on the implementation of the SDGs, including the status, the progress, and the challenges. And civil society spotlight reports are often referred to as shadow reports, but it has been argued that civil society perspectives should not be in the shadows, but rather in the spotlight. And so these reports are tools used in the follow-up and review of the goals and in accountability, and even in bringing in and giving more visibility to the marginalized, because these provide a more nuanced evidence that is grounded in the lived experiences of the people. And so that's what a spotlight report is. And as part of ASBAE's continuing engagement in the SDG 4 and the SDG processes, we actively participate in the VNR processes in the high-level political forum, and we have developed civil society spotlight reports on SDG 4 with national education coalitions in the Asia Pacific. And these reports are usually 4-pagers, starting with a country context and then followed by the proposed content for the year. And it always provides a set of recommendations for actions. So to create a well-defined scope for the report, we choose a theme that is relevant to the theme of the high-level political forum for the particular year. So for the 2019 Spotlight, the theme was on equity and inclusion in education, because the forum had the theme of empowering people and ensuring inclusiveness and equality. And these points were discussed in the reports. And for the 2020 reports, these focused on transformative and resilient education. And for this year, the forum's theme was on accelerated action and transformative pathways. And SDG 4 was not up for review in 2020, so we included a section on the interlinkages of SDG 4 with the other SDGs. And this is something to note, that the report is not necessarily tied to which countries will be reporting, nor is it tied to the specific cluster of goals up for review. So even though SDG 4 is not up for review in 2020 and even in 2021, we still produced SDG 4 reports. Now, in 2021, it was on the education's role in sustainable and resilient recovery, because the HLPF theme was on sustainable and resilient recovery from the pandemic. And we wanted to highlight the role of education in this recovery, as well as the equity and the financing concerns in SDG 4 that have been exacerbated by the pandemic. So I hope that was clear. And you can see here the screenshots of the covers of the reports. Now on to the process. I drew from the 2019, so pre-pandemic process, as well as during the pandemic process. So I hope I can explain this clearly. Well, ASBE and its National Education Coalition members' spotlight reports built on the lessons and the experiences of other organizations that have produced spotlight reports. And so this meeting is, I think, a great initiative from GCE to organize, because you can share the lessons learned, and especially because SDG 4 will be up for review this year. Now, to start the process, a regional consultation is held where members gather to become oriented with the work ahead and to discuss and agree on the content and the implementation plan for the report. So this includes finalizing the outline and planning the next steps. So during the pandemic, we did this virtually, where we presented the concept note on the outline, and we identified challenges in developing the report amidst the crisis. And then members would start gathering data, doing the research, reviewing the literature, and then drafting the report. And there is usually a back and forth where ASBE comments and coalitions consider these comments and address them to improve the draft if they can. And then afterwards, members also make it a point to organize national and youth consultations to make the drafting of the reports a more collaborative process. So it should, and it might consider the inputs of other members, organizations, grassroots communities, youth, to fine-tune the recommendations. So these reports are born out of a process of consultations with relevant stakeholders. And then members also include or can consider including a youth section like UNIT Philippines in their Spotlight Reports 2019 and 2021. They had a page or a section on the youth recommendations coming from the youth. And so this is an option for colleagues as well. And then afterwards, members submit the draft, and ASBE, well, to the best of its ability, conducts a gender review of the reports. So this means reviewing the report from a gender perspective for a more in-depth analysis and to offer advice on the missing gender-related aspects in terms of the data or the content and such. And then the reports are then edited and then sent back to the members for the finalization of the write-up. Now, nearing the end of the process, we then proofread and then we placed it in a layout. And then we return the proofread and the laid out report to the members and for their sign off and for their final comments. And then these are then disseminated and launched or published. These are launched nationally in these national consultations and also regionally in regional advocacy platforms and events to disseminate the messages and to use these to inform advocacy and engagements. So again, for the process, it's about setting up a regional workshop for the framework setting and the outline, and then gathering the data, drafting the report, critiquing the draft, holding national and youth consultations, maybe including a youth section, conducting a gender review, and then editing and proofreading, and then the layout, and then the national and the regional launch and the consultations, and to disseminate the messages of the reports. So I hope that was clear and I wasn't going too fast. I would like to hand it over now to Mr. Rene Raya, ASBE's lead policy analyst for the advocacy, or how the reports inform engagements and advocacies. So thank you, over to you, Mr. Rene.
Yeah, thank you, Lei. And I assume all of us are still awake and still alert to listen and to have good discussions for the rest of this meeting. Okay, if I may continue on related to the advocacy for coming up with a spotlight report. I should say at the start that the spotlight report is not something that is standalone, meaning that it is actually done in the course of the work, in the course of the engagement and advocacy of ASBE coalition members as well as their partners. So they may have, overwhelmed you with the amount of work that is involved. But I should like to emphasize the point that it is part of the ongoing work of the coalitions. And I believe that many or all of the member coalitions of GCE and other organizations involved in advocacy work are doing much of this already. And so it's just really just embedding the spotlight report as part of the overall work being done at the country level and at the regional and global level. So I think the importance of the spotlight report is it amplifies the engagement in the high-level political forum. It enhances and amplifies our work related to the SDGs so that we can continue to push and ensure that the key targets are met within the set deadline. So these are just examples of how coalitions in Asia Pacific uses the spotlight report to be able to push and amplify their respective advocacy. In it, for example, does this uses the spotlight in their BNR engagement with the government, and so they become more recognized. They know that the coalition is credible, and they have very strong messages, and that provides and facilitates their more productive and meaningful engagement in the BNR processes being taken up by the government. And it's also used for legislative actions of the coalition. In Papua New Guinea, for example, the spotlight report were used for stakeholders consultation so that the messages related to SDG 4 is being amplified and broadcasted to government, other civil society partners, and development partners as well. In Kyrgyzstan, for example, this has been translated and disseminated widely in rural areas, targeting also teachers, the rural communities, as well as other education stakeholders and local government units. In Nepal, they have submitted, and this has become a very good instrument for engaging the National Planning Commission so that some of the key advocacies and policy push of the coalition are integrated and included in the policies of the government. Okay. Now, again, Katerina must have explained to you the limitations in the actual engagement in the high-level political forum. Our members, for example, may have been given a space to speak, but it's limited to 2 minutes. But what is the importance of this? Then you are able to bring the message across, but advocacy, use of the spotlight report happens not only during the actual HLPF engagement, because this may be too limiting. It happens throughout the preparation of the BNR, and after when we are able to disseminate the messages. We are able to broadcast how the engagement of our coalitions have been effective in terms of networking, in terms of pushing some of our advocacies into the documents that resulted from the high-level political forum. So these are some of the engagement in the past 3 years where we are able to highlight and use the spotlight reports for different advocacies at the regional and at the global level. So UNESCO meeting for the for the UN preparation for the HLPF, and then the other global and regional forums where we are able to engage and we are able to bring forth the messages that have been articulated in the spotlight report. So these are some of the engagement that we have to maximize the spotlight report. Okay. Now the lessons in preparing and disseminating the spotlight reports. Yeah. So, Lay must have mentioned and emphasized that the spotlight report is an opportunity for collective sharing and planning, not only among us as Bay members, but also with their partners and coalition members as well. And so this is a good way by which we are able to consolidate our thinking related to the policy ask on education for all. Now we also use the spotlight report to leverage partnership with members, local governments, communities, and other relevant networks. So our lesson also is that we need to start early so that we don't rush. We don't look at it as, hey, compliance, we have the spotlight report and that's it. No, but we use the preparation, we use the research that we do as part of our overall research and advocacy work for our policy engagement with our respective governments and with regional and global bodies as well. We don't necessarily reinvent the wheels. There are existing researches, existing data, which we are able to maximize so that it enriches the reports that we prepare. Okay. Yeah, and the spotlight report give more visibility to people behind the statistics, the ones who are in the margins, those who are left behind. And so this is an opportunity for us, for the coalitions, to be able to reach out to our constituencies, especially those who are left behind, so that they are able to articulate and voice out what they think should be addressed related to education, related to how it should be inclusive and equitable. Okay. Now, it is also important to document the process, the engagement, the outcomes, and how we are able to disseminate and the reach of these reports now, because this comes handy when we share with other members of ASBEG, with other coalitions, so that they know how to go about and what could be expected in preparing and in disseminating the spotlight report. Finally, and this was mentioned already, it's very important to come up with concrete, actionable recommendations. So this is not just a situationer, this is not just slogans, the big ones, but we want concrete, actionable recommendations that can be taken up by the government, by local government, and by UNESCO and the global community. Yep. And so I think these are the important lessons that we learned while we prepare and disseminate the spotlight reports. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you so much, dear Rene and dear Lei, for this fantastic presentation. This is absolutely amazing, and this really shows how our good work can be done in terms of preparing spotlight reports. So we will ask for your cooperation in the process for other GC members, regional members, and national members, but we will address on this afterwards. So now it's time to try to respond some of the questions. So Lei and Rene, please don't go away because there might be some questions to you. There are some questions in the chat box. I'll try to answer. Julie Juma is asking, when will the political statement be available for our input? I guess you are referring to the political declaration. The process
Yes.
has started now. All the inputs will come from the major groups, meaning that GCE will be in charge of giving you the information you request for providing inputs. So we will be constantly keeping you posted, keeping you updated on the process. So you will be able to provide inputs to the ministerial declaration, which is very important to stress, is that input should be very concrete, and very short. I mean, we just cannot, we don't have the room for very long paragraphs in the ministerial declaration, because this is something that comes from governments, So we will need to be very strategic and really provide inputs in, strategic concepts and very sharp suggestions. But this is something what we can deal with. So the process just started, and we will share with you the draft text when it comes, when it's available. So everybody will be, requested to provide inputs. So yeah, all inputs come from through the major groups. This is the way the UN organized the process of civil society participation. So it's important to be part of the education and academia stakeholder group. All GC members have the right to be part of the education academia stakeholder group. So it's important for us that you can just send us an email saying that you can be active members of the education academia, so we can take you into consideration in all processes. In any case, all the information will be shared throughout the GC official channels, so don't worry, you will get the information. El Salvador, I think, is not part of the voluntary review process, Nelsie. I think that El Salvador is not in the list, but I may be wrong. So let me double check, and I will come back to you later with confirmation if El Salvador is reporting this year. I think it is not, but let me check. In any case, the presentations and the video will be shared with you. We'll be very happy to share this information with you all. And Samia is asking about the co-chairing. Okay, the Education Academia Stakeholder Group has 3 organizing partners, which are GCE, ICAE, and the Global Student Forum. And in the case of chairing, traditionally ICAE and GCE has been chairing the participation. Let's see what else. Okay, I don't have any other specific questions, so let me just ask you whether you want to make another question. You can do it now if you wish. Okay, Krista, the coalitions working in those countries who are reporting this year are called to produce spotlights reports. Okay, that's the rationale. So not all members, but only those members based in the reporting countries are invited to produce spotlight reports this year. So every year changes, no? Okay.
Thank you, Werner. Just to ask, what is the best way to support with advocacy if we're not being called to produce a report this year then?
Well, I would say that in the case of the countries who are reporting this year, you can produce the spotlight reports and disseminate it. For the other members and for the regional coalitions, and in the case of the GCE US, it would be important to help by the dissemination and discussion spotlight reports. So organizing webinar, for instance, that might be a good way to do it, and also participating in the side event GCE is organizing on VNRs and spotlight reports would be a way to help with advocacy processes, and taking the spotlight reports as an input for advocacy, general advocacy might be a good way to do it as well. Yes, Wolfgang, please.
Yeah, you may have not realized I had put a question into the chat box. I saw in some of the DESA announcements that there's also now talk of voluntary local reports, which look at SDG realization at local development level. Is there any way that we think about engaging with those as well, or does it make things too complicated?
Well, it might be complicated, but in any case, it's a good way to really highlight specific developments at the local level. So I would encourage that kind of approach that might be also included in the national report as well. Mm. But maybe this is something that Renee and Lei want to comment about. I don't know.
I think the localization at the national level of the SDGs is going on much slower compared to the MDGs, at least in a few of the countries that I know. In the MDGs, I remember there has been really a strong push to localize. And in that sense, there are reports coming in from local governments as well. This is something that we want really to push. Of course, there are a few countries in the region, in our region, such as Nepal, I think Pakistan also, and Philippines to some extent, but it's really slow. We wanted to, push harder so that it can be localized, so that there is better ownership and engagement in the SDGs. Yeah, so maybe we can work together to push that harder.
Yeah, and for instance, in the case of Latin America, indigenous peoples are located in some specific regions. So it will be very interesting to have local reports regarding, for instance, indigenous nations within a state. That might be a good possibility as an example. Rene, there is another question for you. Julie Juma is asking how well received are the spotlight reports received by governments in your experience?
Yeah, I would say that generally governments across the region acknowledge and there is a degree of recognition on these spotlight reports. It's an entry point for coalitions not to be able to engage in the government's BNR processes, but it's still marginal in a way. Sometimes government is, it's just a tick in the box, meaning we have consulted the civil society with our BNR report on our SDG, rather than really having a deep and meaningful engagement. No, of course, there are countries such as Nepal, to some extent in the Philippines, because we have also sectoral consultation. So health, education, gender, and financing for development. So to some extent, there are also governments that are more receptive to civil society. I think Indonesia also and Sri Lanka. So it's also how active the stakeholders, the coalitions are in in the SDG advocacy work, and that really gives an opportunity to open wider spaces for inviting civil society and acknowledging their engagement. For example, in the case of Vanuatu, when the coalition put up their spotlight report, the government said, that is how you do the BNR. So that's a really very good acknowledgement. And they even cited the coalition doing the spotlight report when they reported during the HLPF in, I think, 2019 or 2020, something like that. So I think with really consistent push and substance in our reports and our engagement, then we are able to, slow by slow, have meaningful engagement with government.
Thank you so much, dear Rene, for these comments. And Charlotte is asking about the GCE support on producing the Spotlight report. And this is actually the next segment and the final segment for this call about the next steps. So how are we going to move forward together with you is the matter of our next segment. And for this, I would like to give the floor to Luis Eduardo, our research officer, to comment a bit on the next steps before we close the session. Luis Eduardo, please go ahead.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you very much. And thank you, Rene and Leah, for such a wonderful presentation. It's very informative and very useful. So I just want to share three things. The first thing is that we are going to share with you all the timelines and the agenda for the activities we are going to organize. So please keep an eye on your emails. As Bernard mentioned, we are going to co-organize 3 main events. So we will share with you the information in due time. I mean, the Education Academic Stakeholder Group event, the alternative reports, and the GCE critical reflections around the Sustainable Development Goal 4. In terms of the step forward, and this is the second thing I want to share with you, we are planning, and I don't know if Leah and would be happy to support us in this process, because we have heard how wonderful report you provide, you design, but it would be great for our movement, I mean for all the coalitions, to have more insights in terms of how do you really select the questions and what are the process of preparing a report, from the question to the collecting data, the methods, building the analytical framework, then developing the analysis, and then just putting all this together in such a short period of time. So it would be good, for example, as a next step, to organize a session, more kind of a workshop, identifying kind of activities, thinking about, okay, but in this particular country, which you're going to present a report, what question will be make sense? We don't need to share the same questions. Maybe how to identify the specific angle for each country, and also to really understand what is the possibility of a national coalition to develop a report, because we can see here a clear step forward to how to develop the report. But at some point, maybe coalitions don't have time, don't have the skills, don't have many barriers. So it will be a workshop just to focus on, if you are going to develop a report, maybe you need to consider A, B, C, D, and E. And then we will be in a better position, I mean the Secretariat, to understand how can we really engage with you and to support methodologically and conceptually the production of such report. So I do believe this partly answered one of the last questions I saw in the chat box. And then we are going to organize a session to share with those coalitions interested in drafting a spotlight report in detail some of the critical research we had been drafting or published during the last year. So we have discussed this possibility with our colleagues from Action ID, And we want to share with you mainly three things that we do believe are useful for drafting the Spotlight reports. The first thing is the so-called Financing the Future Fact Sheets, Delivering Sustainable Development Goal 4, which has produced Action ID for Zambia, Senegal, and Nepal. So these fact sheets will be launched very soon, and they will be available for you all to consider all the practicalities and the critical issues about financing education, how this can be useful for presenting the report. Senegal and Nepal will be presenting, so these fact sheets is really an invitation to engage with these fact sheets and to get input from there. At the same time, we are also want to share research we have been doing with Open Society Foundation and again with Action ID for 7 countries: Zambia, Gambia, Nepal, Mongolia, El Salvador, Georgia, and Lebanon, which speaks about the importance of debt alleviation mechanisms to financing education. So we really want to invite you to read those reports that are available on our website, and happy to engage with you. For example, in the context of Gambia or Nepal, who are going to present, you want to learn more, we can work with the coalition, with you, or the people who will be involved in the production of the report to really discuss, go into the critical findings of these pieces of research and to identify key messages to highlight at the high-level political forum. And finally, and this is a reminder, I do believe there is substantial ideas for you to be maybe considered when drafting your reports about this publication on transformative education, which include case studies from different countries. And why this I do believe is important, because we are linking 3 main elements that are the core of the Sustainable Development Goal target, which are how bringing change for disadvantaged communities. We all are very much concerned about gender issues, about exclusion. Already Werner mentioned, for example, the possibility to draft a report addressing specific issues for indigenous communities, Black communities, or people who are being living or left behind concerning the right to education. But this publication also brings about what needs to be changed when we use the idea of transformative education. We are perhaps very unhappy with the ways many of our countries have been addressing the ongoing health pandemic, but what do we need to care about? What do we need to have in mind? And how policies can be driving to really create change and transform the systems to secure the right to education, whether when people are able or not to access to technology, modern technology that is not available for all. So all these practicalities are really relevant to how can we use this knowledge, this expertise, this data, these findings to draft our reports. And finally, and this is very often in our conversations with our members, very often we just question neoliberal approaches to education, but why? Why we are doing that, and what are the alternatives? So some of the cases we include in the publication, and in particular those who speaks about India, Pakistan, many African countries, but also Brazil, Ecuador, and many more, can be really insightful to really help us to develop our ideas, why we are so unhappy with the process of the trends that are taking education, what we are talking about: commercialization, privatization, commodification, all these kind of issues. How can put together all these critical elements in a single framework to produce a very effective practice show report that really makes an impact, something that you can read and really support national organizations, your country, to develop better policies to protect the right to education for all. So this is, in summary, our 3 main steps forward. First of all, sharing with you all the information that we have in terms of the processes of the event we are going to organize. Second, inviting publicly Renee and Leah to develop a second workshop with more detail, more practical issues, practical steps to develop a report. And third, sharing with you if you need more insights, more discussion about how can we build on the research we have been doing with our partners to fit those reports and to provide them with evidence. So happy to address any comment or question if you have any.
Thank you so much, Luis Eduardo, for this explanation. So these are our plans. The table is served, and we will be very happy to try to facilitate all the process to you and with you. So all your suggestions on the issues that we should cover in our side events will be very, very welcome. So please do not hesitate to share with us your ideas. We will be bringing more information about the content of the side events shortly, as well as in general on the organization of the HLPF 2022, which will have as part of the main focus, the right to education, SDG 4. So all side events will be live streamed, so everybody will be able to attend. We still don't know if we are going to organize some of these initiatives in person in New York, but most probably will be virtual. So we will inform about this shortly. Okay, time is now up, and I think that we can close this call now, unless you have any burning issue to address. If not, I think that we can close the call. So let me thank you so much for your participation, your attention. Special thanks to Rene, Katarina, Lei, and for our GCE Secretariat colleagues who facilitated this work. And thank you special to the interpreters who help us with this process. So take good care of yourselves, colleagues. And bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Bernard.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
GC.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.